Welcome, dear friends, to a tale of love, loss, and unexpected twists of fate. Enjoy the story. Emily Parker stood frozen in the middle of the lavish ballroom, her white designer gown a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around her. Guests whispered and pointed as a woman in her 60s, her face contorted with rage, tore the marriage certificate to shreds. "You gold-digging little orphan!" the woman spat, her eyes blazing with contempt. "Did you really think you could worm your way into our family?" Emily's eyes filled with tears as she watched the pieces of paper flutter to the ground. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, her ticket to finally giving her little sister the home she deserved. Now, it was all falling apart. Without a word, Emily hitched up her skirts and ran, ignoring the calls of her bewildered groom, Jack Thompson. She burst out of the country club doors, her mind racing as fast as her feet. How had it come to this? Emily's thoughts drifted back to the day she first met Jack, 4 years ago. Emily had been working as a janitor at Thompson Tech, one of Silicon Valley's rising stars in software development. At just 20 years old, she was juggling her job with classes at the local community college, determined to build a better life for herself and her little sister Lily. One evening, as she was finishing up her shift, a voice startled her. "Excuse me," said a tall, handsome man in his late 20s. "I hope I'm not bothering you, but I was wondering if I could walk you out." Emily looked up, surprised to see Jack Thompson, one of the company's top executives, standing before her. She'd seen him around the office, of course, but they'd never spoken. "Oh, that's kind of you," Emily replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious in her cleaning uniform. "But I just live at the dorms down the street. It's not far at all." Jack's smile was warm and genuine. "Even better. It'll give us a chance to chat, if you don't mind the company." As they walked, Emily found herself opening up to Jack in a way she rarely did with anyone. There was something about his gentle demeanor that put her at ease. "So, what brings a smart girl like you to janitorial work?" Jack asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. Emily sighed. "Life, I guess. My mom passed away a few years ago, and I'm trying to save up enough to get custody of my little sister. She's in foster care right now." Jack's eyes widened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Emily. That must be incredibly difficult." "It is," Emily admitted, "but Lily's worth it. I'll do whatever it takes to give her a real home." As they reached the dorms, Jack hesitated. "Listen, Emily, I know this might sound forward, but would you like to grab coffee sometime? Just as friends," he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. Emily bit her lip, considering. Jack was undeniably attractive and kind, but she couldn't afford distractions. "I don't know, Jack. I'm not really in a place for anything right now." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it. But how about this? We start as friends. No pressure, no expectations. I just think you're someone worth knowing better." Against her better judgment, Emily found herself agreeing. Little did she know, that decision would change the course of her life forever. Over the next few months, Emily and Jack's friendship grew. They met for coffee, took walks in the park, and even started having lunch together at work. Emily was surprised to find how easy it was to talk to Jack about anything and everything. One sunny afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the bay, Jack turned to her with a serious expression. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice hesitant. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment she'd been dreading, where Jack would confess romantic feelings she couldn't reciprocate? "What is it, Jack?" she asked, bracing herself. Jack took a deep breath. I have a complicated relationship with my family, especially my mother. I haven't been entirely honest about my background." Emily relaxed slightly, more curious than apprehensive now. "What do you mean?" "My mother is controlling, to put it mildly," Jack explained. "She has very specific ideas about how I should live my life, who I should date, everything. I basically ran away from home to start my own life here in Silicon Valley." Emily's eyes widened. "Wow, Jack. I had no idea. That must have been really hard." Jack nodded, a sad smile on his face. "It was. And it still is sometimes. I talk to her occasionally on the phone, but I never tell her where I work or live. She'd try to take over my life again if she knew. I'm so sorry you've had to deal with that, Emily said softly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. Thank you for trusting me enough to share. Jack looked at her, his eyes full of warmth. You're easy to trust, Emily. You're one of the most genuine people I've ever met. As they sat there, hands still touching, Emily felt a flutter in her chest. She quickly pushed it away, reminding herself that friendship was all she could offer right now. But for the first time, she wondered if maybe, someday, there could be something more. 2 years passed, and Emily's life had changed dramatically. With Jack's help, she'd secured a better-paying position at Thompson Tech and finished her associate's degree. She was finally in a position to apply for custody of Lily. But when the day of the custody hearing arrived, Emily's hopes were dashed. I'm sorry, Miss Parker, the stern-faced social worker said, but we don't feel you're in a position to provide adequate care for a child. You're young, single, and your living situation is unstable. Perhaps if you were married, it would demonstrate more stability. Emily left the courthouse in tears, her dreams of reuniting with Lily seemingly shattered. She found Jack waiting for her outside, concern etched on his face. Oh, Em, he said softly, pulling her into a hug. What happened? Through her sobs, Emily recounted the social worker's decision. Jack listened patiently, his brow furrowed in thought. This is ridiculous, he muttered. You're the most responsible, caring person I know. There has to be something we can do. Suddenly, Jack's eyes lit up. Wait a minute. What if we got married? Emily pulled back, staring at him in shock. What? Jack, we're not even dating. Jack held up his hands. I know, but hear me out. It would be a temporary arrangement, just long enough to get custody of Lily. We're already best friends. We practically spend all our time together anyway. And I have a big apartment. There'd be plenty of room for Lily. Emily's mind raced. It was crazy, absolutely insane. But as she thought about Lily, alone in the foster care system, she felt her resolve weakening. Jack, I can't ask you to do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took her hands in his eyes serious. You're not asking, Em. I'm offering. You and Lily deserve to be together. Let me help make that happen. Emily searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, she took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, she said, her voice shaky but determined. Let's do it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Emily and Jack decided to have a small ceremony, inviting only a few close friends. They agreed to keep it a secret from Jack's family, not wanting to risk his mother's interference. On the morning of the wedding, Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her simple white dress. Her stomach was in knots, a mix of excitement and anxiety churning inside her. A knock at the door startled her. Em, can I come in? It was Jack. Just a second, Emily called, quickly smoothing her dress and hair. She opened the door to find Jack looking dashing in a dark suit, a nervous smile on his face. Wow, he breathed, taking in the sight of her. You look beautiful. Emily blushed, suddenly feeling shy. Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself. Jack chuckled, then his expression grew serious. Listen, Em, before we do this, I need to make sure you're absolutely certain. This is a big step, even if it is temporary. Emily took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. I'm sure, Jack. Are you? He nodded, reaching out to squeeze her hand. Absolutely. Let's go get married. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, held in the garden of the country club. As they exchanged vows, Emily was surprised to feel tears pricking at her eyes. Even though this was just an arrangement, a means to an end, there was something undeniably moving about the moment. As they turned to face their small group of friends, Emily's heart swelled with hope. Soon, she'd be able to bring Lily home. Everything was falling into place. But just as the officiant was about to pronounce them husband and wife, a commotion erupted at the back of the garden. Jack Thompson! A shrill voice cried out. What in God's name do you think you're doing? Emily watched in horror as an elegantly dressed older woman stormed down the aisle, her face a mask of fury. Jack's hand tightened around hers. Mom, he said, his voice tight. What are you doing here? Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life? Jack's mother spat. She turned her venomous gaze on Emily. And you scheming little gold digger? Before anyone could react, she snatched the marriage certificate from the officiant's hands and tore it to shreds. There, she declared triumphantly. Now this farce of a wedding is over. Emily stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. All her hopes, her dreams of reuniting with Lily were crumbling before her eyes. Without a word, she turned and ran, ignoring Jack's calls behind her. She had to get away, had to think. As she burst out of the country club, tears streaming down her face, Emily had no idea that her life was about to take yet another unexpected turn. Emily found herself wandering aimlessly through the streets of Palo Alto, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She barely noticed where she was going until she found herself at the edge of a small park overlooking San Francisco Bay. As she approached the water's edge, movement on a nearby pedestrian bridge caught her eye. An elderly woman was slowly making her way across the structure, which Emily suddenly realized was closed for repairs. Hey! Emily called out, her own troubles momentarily forgotten. Ma'am, stop! The bridge is unsafe! The woman didn't seem to hear her, continuing her slow progress. Without thinking, Emily hitched up her wedding dress and ran towards the bridge. Please stop! She cried, her heart racing as she saw the woman nearing a section where the planks had been removed. Just as the elderly lady was about to step into thin air, Emily reached her, grabbing her arm. Oh my! The woman exclaimed, startled out of her reverie. She looked around, suddenly realizing the danger she'd been in. Good heavens! I was lost in thought. Thank you, dear. You may have just saved my life. Emily sagged with relief. I'm just glad I got here in time. Are you all right? The woman nodded, then took a closer look at Emily. My dear, you're in a wedding dress. Shouldn't you be celebrating your nuptials instead of rescuing absent-minded old ladies? Emily's face fell as the events of the day came rushing back. It's complicated, she said softly. The older woman's eyes softened with sympathy. Why don't we sit for a moment? I'd love to hear your story if you're willing to share it. As they made their way to a nearby bench, Emily found herself pouring out the whole tale. Her childhood, losing her mother, her friendship with Jack, and the disastrous almost wedding. The woman listened intently, her expression a mix of sympathy and something else Emily couldn't quite place. When Emily finished, the woman reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. My dear, you've been through so much, she said, her voice kind. Please, allow me to make a small contribution to help you and your sister. Emily's eyes widened as she saw the amount the woman was writing. Oh no, I couldn't possibly... But her words died in her throat as she caught sight of a photograph in the woman's open wallet. It was a picture of a young woman who looked startlingly like Emily herself. Wait, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that my mother? The woman's hand froze, her eyes meeting Emily's in shock. Your mother? This is a picture of my daughter, Marina. Emily's world tilted on its axis. Marina was my mother's name, but that would mean... I'm your grandmother, the woman finished, her voice filled with wonder and a touch of fear. Just then they heard a voice calling out, Emily! Emily, where are you? It was Jack, looking frantic as he ran towards them. He skidded to a stop when he saw Emily sitting with the older woman. Thank God, he panted. I've been looking everywhere for you. Listen, about my mother. But Emily barely heard him. She was still staring at the woman beside her, her long-lost grandmother. Jack, she said slowly, I think you need to meet someone. As Emily made the introductions, she could see the shock and confusion on Jack's face. Your grandmother? He repeated, looking between Emily and the older woman. But I thought... So did I, Emily said softly. She turned back to her newfound grandmother. I don't understand. Mom always said she didn't have any family left. The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Blackwell, sighed heavily. It's a long and complicated story, my dear. Your mother and I, we had a falling out many years ago. She was so much like her father, stubborn to a fault. As Margaret began to explain the family history, they were interrupted by the arrival of another unexpected guest, Jack's mother, looking flustered and out of breath. "There you are!" she exclaimed, glaring at Jack and Emily. "I hope you've come to your senses about this ridiculous marriage." But as her eyes fell on Margaret, she froze. "Mrs. Blackwell? What on earth are you doing here?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You know me?" Jack's mother nodded, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Of course. Blackwell Shoes is one of the biggest names in the industry. But what does that have to do with—" "Oh." Realization dawned on her face as she looked between Margaret and Emily. "You're related?" Margaret stood, drawing herself up to her full height. "Indeed we are. Emily is my granddaughter, and the heir to the Blackwell Empire. Now, I believe you owe her an apology for your behavior earlier." Jack's mother paled, her earlier bravado evaporating. I had no idea. I thought she was just some gold digger after Jack's money." Emily, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. "I never wanted Jack's money. I just wanted to give my sister a home." Jack stepped forward, taking Emily's hand. "And that's exactly what we're going to do. Mom, I love you, but you need to understand that this is my life. Emily is the kindest, most selfless person I know, and I'm lucky to have her in my life, whether as a friend or something more." His mother opened her mouth to protest, but Margaret cut her off. "I think we all have a lot to discuss. Why don't we go somewhere more private and sort this out like adults?" As they made their way back to the country club, Emily's head was spinning. In the span of a few hours, her world had been turned upside down. She'd lost a wedding, gained a grandmother, and possibly irreparably damaged Jack's relationship with his mother. But as she felt Jack's hand squeeze hers reassuringly, she realized that maybe, just maybe, things were finally falling into place. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With Margaret's influence and resources, the custody process for Lily was expedited. Emily found herself in a daze as she watched her little sister step into Margaret's expansive Palo Alto home for the first time. "Is this really where we're going to live?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the grand staircase and crystal chandeliers. Emily knelt down beside her, tears of joy in her eyes. "Yes, sweetie, this is our new home, and look who's here to welcome you." Jack stepped forward, a warm smile on his face. "Hi, Lily. I'm Jack. I've heard so much about you." Lily looked up at him shyly. "Are you Emily's boyfriend?" Jack chuckled, glancing at Emily with a soft expression. "Well, that's a bit complicated. But I'm definitely a friend, and I'm really excited to get to know you." As they settled into their new life, Emily found herself growing closer to both Jack and Margaret. Her grandmother was eager to make up for lost time, regaling them with stories of Emily's mother as a young girl, and teaching Lily about the family business. One evening, as Emily and Jack sat on the terrace overlooking the bay, Jack turned to her with a serious expression. I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant, "about us, about this whole situation." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What about it?" Jack took a deep breath. "I know we started this as an arrangement to help you get custody of Lily, but these past few weeks, living here with you and Lily, getting to know your grandmother, it's made me realize something." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "I'm in love with you, Emily. I think I have been for a long time, but I was too scared to admit it. I don't want this to be a temporary thing. I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh, Jack," she whispered. "I love you too. I think I always have. I just didn't know how to handle it." As they leaned in for a kiss, a voice interrupted them. "Well, it's about time." They turned to see Margaret standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "I was wondering how long it would take you two to figure it out." Emily blushed, but Jack just laughed, pulling her closer. "I guess we're not as subtle as we thought." Margaret's expression softened. "You know, you remind me so much of your mother and father, Emily. They had that same spark, that same connection. I only wish I had seen it sooner." Emily felt a pang of sadness at the mention of her parents, but it was tempered by the warmth of her new family. "Tell me more about them," she said softly. As Margaret joined them on the terrace, sharing stories of the past, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had found her place in the world, surrounded by love and family. 5 years later. The Blackwell-Thompson household was a flurry of activity as they prepared for Lily's high school graduation. Emily, now a successful executive at Blackwell Shoes, was trying to wrangle her 3-year-old son Max into his suit. "Come on, sweetie," she coaxed. "Don't you want to look handsome for Aunt Lily's big day?" Jack appeared in the doorway, looking dapper in his own suit. "Need some help here?" he asked with a grin. Emily shot him a grateful look. "Your son seems to have inherited your aversion to formal wear." Jack scooped up Max, tickling him until he giggled. "Hey, buddy, how about we make a deal? You wear the suit for the ceremony, and afterward, we'll go get ice cream. Sound good?" Max's eyes lit up. "Ice cream? Okay, Daddy." As they finally managed to get everyone dressed and into the car, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how much her life had changed. From a struggling student working as a janitor to a happily married mother and successful businesswoman, it was more than she ever could have dreamed. At the graduation ceremony, Emily spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Jack's mother, Sandra, was waving at them, a tentative smile on her face. While their relationship was still a work in progress, Sandra had made efforts to be a part of their lives, especially after Max was born. As Lily walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Emily felt Jack squeeze her hand. She looked up to see tears in his eyes. "You did it, Em," he whispered. "You gave her the life you always wanted for her." Emily leaned into him, overcome with emotion. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." After the ceremony, as they gathered for a family photo, Emily, Jack, Lily, Max, Margaret, and even Sandra, Emily felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. Later that night, as she tucked Max into bed, he asked sleepily, "Mommy, tell me the story again, about how you and Daddy fell in love." Emily smiled, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Well, sweetie, it all started with a chance meeting and a walk home." As she recounted their story, Emily marveled at the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. From orphaned sisters to a family filled with love, from a fake wedding to a real and lasting partnership. It had been a journey she never could have anticipated. But as she looked around at the life she had built, the family she had found and created, Emily knew that every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it. This was her happily ever after, and it was more beautiful than she ever could have imagined.